Pastor's Heart, and Dominic Steele here. And today, loving singles at Christmas and over January. Dani Treweek is our guest, and we are live on Facebook a few hours earlier than usual today, as we have a Christmas lunch to get to. Here at our church, at Village Church, we share office space with Compassion Sydney, and our staff team is having lunch with the Compassion Sydney team today. And look, whatever the complexities that we have been going through with COVID, wherever you are in the West, the complexities in loving children in the child sponsorship space is significantly better. Is significantly bigger. The work on the ground has been much harder. The parents of Compassion kids who've succumbed to COVID across the world, the complexities for their staff, and in the wealthier areas where they appeal to people to become sponsors, the whole connecting with people has been much harder during this season with churches going online. So do pray for Compassion this Christmas season and see what you can do for them. And look, also, we're asking you to subscribe to the Pastor's Heart email. You can go to thepastorsheart.net, and each week we send out an email with details of that week's episode, and that way our communication with you is not left to the vagaries of the Facebook algorithms. And look, we would appreciate it if you can get behind us in the Pastor's Heart ministry. We're looking for Patreon supporters at patreon.com/thepastorsheart. Now, my friend Dani Treweek is with me. Dr. Dani Treweek.
Reverend Dr. Dani Treweek, if we're going to be precise about it, but Dani is fine.
So since we last spoke here, you've become a Doctor of Singleness.
I am. Actually, the award isn't conferred until, what's the date today? The 21st, 22nd? It's conferred on the 23rd. So
2 days.
Tomorrow, maybe, I will officially be a doctor. But yes, I've just finished my PhD on looking at theological ethics of singleness.
Let's talk the Pastor's Heart and the complexities for singles over Christmas. I was in a conversation with two of my team yesterday, and they were just telling me about a series of pastoral conversations that they were in with singles who were going to find this Christmas January period a time to be endured rather than enjoyed.
Yeah.
Is that the feedback you're getting?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I think the first to say is that Christmas can be a really difficult time for lots of different people. I know plenty of married people find Christmas very difficult too. But yes, I think it is. There is something unique about being single at Christmas for many people, whether they're never married or divorced or widowed. I actually run a ministry called the Single Minded Conference, and we've got a Facebook community group. And when I knew that I was coming on to talk with you about this, I put the question out to the community and asked the singles in the community, tell me what you find hard and complex, and also a blessing about being single at being single at Christmas. And I was so thankful for all the responses. Some of them really resonated with me. I felt, as a single person myself, I felt that. Some were things that I had not thought about before that were unique to being single at Christmas.
Well, let's go through some of those things, because some of them got to do with, if you like, the idolisation of coupledom and family. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the messaging of Christmas, isn't it? At least in the secular world.
It is, isn't it? What is Christmas all about? It's kids. Yeah.
Well, that's right. It's kids. It's about being with the ones you love, which is primarily your little nuclear household. You just look at the ads that get played. We're not just talking about Christmas Day. We're talking about, weeks and weeks and weeks leading up to it. There is just a natural emphasis on being part of a couple and being part of a family and creating memories together as a family. You think of all the Christmas rom-coms that flood Netflix and other, all the Hallmark ones. I've never watched one of them, but I've heard plenty about them. We, as sort of 21st century Western people, sort of associate Christmas with this kind of, romantic family life. And that can leave many singles feeling quite isolated, and that Christmas isn't really a time for them. And
that's both for singles who are single, who have never married, and actually also singles who are in the divorce.
Well, yeah, and also widows and widowers. I mean, if you're single again, whether it's through divorce or death, this time of year can be a reminder of everything you've lost, that you had this thing that the world says, is one of the most important things, and you no longer do. Or at least you no longer have it in the way that you had hoped you would always have it. And so it can be really difficult.
There's a time warp problem as well. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, this was interesting. A number of people in the single-minded community talked about how Christmas is kind of, it comes around every year, and we tend to generally celebrate it with our families. And so every Christmas Day is kind of that passing of the year, the milestone that marks what's occurred over the year. And also, in a bigger sense, it's a reflection of how the years have changed. And so I recognise that, as I sit with my family. I have a wonderful family. I love spending Christmas with them. But for me, my Christmas is very much the same as it was 10 or 15 years ago. I'm single. I haven't brought a husband into the fold. I haven't brought children into the fold. Whereas other members of my family have done that, and Christmas has changed for them, and the way that we celebrate Christmas has changed. And singles, particularly those who are never married, can feel like they're in a bit of a time warp. They go back to their parents' place for Christmas Eve and they sleep in the single bed that they grew up sleeping in, and they kind of think, have I actually graduated to adulthood? And
one lady, 48, and had that experience.
yeah, that's right. A sense in which, she kind of felt
and
like...
And she's the one who gets thrown out of the bed when somebody else comes.
Well, that's right. She said when they have other visitors coming over for Christmas Day, for Christmas Eve to stay with them, she's the one who needs to leave her bed so that they can sleep in the proper bed and she can go and sleep on the
couch.
Another friend of mine, I was talking to her yesterday, she's now married, but she was single for the first 40 years of her life. And she said it used to infuriate her that before she was married, when she said to her family, okay, what can I bring for Christmas lunch? They'd say, oh, just bring the drinks, dear. As if she wasn't capable as a single person of actually contributing in an adult way to the family celebration. And it's never intentional, and I don't think parents would ever say, oh, we still think of you as a child. But often those actions kind of betray the sense that many singles feel stuck in this kind of time warp at Christmas. One single person talked about how she feels guilty sitting around her Christmas table not having actually brought children into this family. So lots of different experiences there.
And spiritually isolating as well.
Yeah, and this was something I hadn't thought too much about, but then it really resonated with me as I read a few people talk about this, that if you're a Christian and you're married to a Christian, and particularly if you have children, weeks and weeks leading up to Christmas, you're trying to remind your children what this time of year is all about. It's about Jesus. We're celebrating Jesus. Christmas Day, you will normally as a family go to church, and depending on what your wider family situation is, that celebration on Christmas Day can be very much intentionally and obviously and unapologetically focused on Jesus. If you're single and you're from a non-Christian family, you don't have that. You don't have the person who wakes up next to you on Christmas morning and says, wow, Jesus has come to earth. You don't have the family necessarily, some do, who will go to church with you and celebrate that with you.
Well, I was reflecting on that. I grew up as a Roman Catholic, and they'd go to midnight mass. When I became Christian, I didn't go to church for at least it was after I got married. It was the first time I went to church on Christmas Day. Do you know?
Because because that's not what your family did.
I was expected to be at my parents' house at 10 a.m. I was the minister of the church actually for a little while, and I'd turn up late at Christmas lunch.
Yeah, that's right. I hadn't stopped to really think about that before, but I think it's true that for many singles, they don't have someone who's helping them to actually focus on what this time of year is actually all about, what we are celebrating. And that doesn't mean that they can't personally remember. Of course they can. But they often do it outside of, immediate community. And I think this year...
with the whole COVID thing and particularly with the shutdown in Australia. We got people all around the world watching us.
Yeah.
But in Australia the last week, we just had we've had the most wonderful journey with COVID compared to the rest of the world. And it is still, this city, Sydney, a city of 5 million people, and to have only had 15 cases in the last 24 hours is fantastic blessing compared to anywhere else in the world. However...
well, basically, pretty much every other state border has shut itself off to New South Wales at this point. And so there are lots of singles, divorcees, widows and never marrieds who have not seen their family all year and who were just so excited to either have their family come down for Christmas or to go and spend time with their family at Christmas. And clearly that's impacted a lot of those plans. And there are singles now who are scrambling, looking to do what they're going to do apart from spend Christmas Day sitting by themselves in their house.
Now, I'm going to talk to you a moment about
Yep.
January, because
Okay.
January is also a desert for single people,
Yeah.
and we need to talk about that.
Yep.
But firstly, what can churches do, and what can churches do? Where do churches get it right, wrong? What are some of the mistakes we make? How can we do better? What can we do to love people over these next few days?
I don't think there's any one-size-fits-all answer to that. And I do also want to say that singles are not just passive passengers in this too. We as single Christians need to actually be proactive in the way that we seek to address some of these things that we find difficult. As a kind of big picture statement, I think one of the most important things that churches can do right now at this time of year is to see the single people in their midst. You feel invisible. I mean, a lot of single people struggle with sort of feeling invisible throughout the year. But over this time in particular, it's very easy to feel just completely invisible. And this year, a lot of singles do Christmas by themselves. Everywhere they go, they're driving by themselves. All the decisions they're making for Christmas, they're doing by themselves. All the shopping that they're having to do, they do by themselves. And then this year, they're going to be turning up to church by themselves, and they're going to be needing to sit in a pew or a chair isolated from everybody else around them by themselves, while they look at all the family groups in getting to celebrate Christmas in their own little individual families.
So we had this discussion this week in our staff team, in that up until now, as we came back from COVID, we've sent the kids off to a program and not had them come into the auditorium. And we just thought, hard to manage when you can't sit next to... And so we've had all the chairs equally spaced around the auditorium with little coffee tables between them. But Christmas morning is the first morning where we're actually going to have kids in the auditorium. And so, this is the first moment where we have to work out how to navigate helping kids to sit next to their parents and single people not to feel on their own. Well, what's your tip for Friday morning for us?
Well, the reality is this is the way that we have to do seating. In a socially distanced world, there's no way around this. This is the way that we need to do it. And it's right for families to be able to celebrate Christmas with each other. But again, I think it's just making those people who are sitting by themselves feel not just visible but known and loved and welcomed, that you're genuinely excited and happy that they're there, not as guests, not as visitors looking in, but actually as members of this community. And I'm not quite sure how you do that when the reality is they're going to be physically isolated, but it has to happen in relationship as much as anything else. There's no easy answer to it, but I think just being aware that walking into church by yourself at any time is quite difficult. But on Christmas Day, it can be quite devastating. So that's one thing. Lots of people on the single-minded community talked about how wonderful it is that they get invited to people's places.
For lunch.
I think that probably happens more than it used to, is my instinct. I want to say, please keep doing that, but also, as you do it, invite that single person into your home for Christmas, not as a guest, but as a member of the family. And that is things like, don't simply ask them to turn up at 1 o'clock when the table's all set and lunch is ready to go. Think about inviting them to come over and unwrap presents with the kids. I love spending Christmas morning with my niece and nephew and watching them unwrap all their presents. There's something delightful about that. Singles often miss out on that, particularly those who don't have children of their own. So inviting them into that, inviting them to help you get lunch prepared, to set the table, to clean the house, to make sure the kids are presentable. Actually, that is a way to show these, your single friends that they're not just guests, but they're members of the family. Guests don't get involved in the chaos. Family members are involved in the mess. And so, encourage those people to come over and be part of your Christmas day and part of the cleanup at the other end.
Well, that's right. At our church, we've been thinking, slightly different perspective, but We've been doing a lunch on Christmas Day, particularly. I mean, our suburb, as you would know, is a massive percentage of singles. The new apartments, 70% one-bedroom apartments, 1,500 new apartments down the road.
Yeah.
And so if we're not loving the single person as a major priority, then we've got our mission strategy wrong.
Yeah.
And also percentage of people in the church who are single is super high.
Yeah.
And caring for divorcees, all that kind of thing. And one of the complexities is we've got lunch, and we've had it grow over the last couple of years, so we're expecting 70 odd people for lunch on Christmas Day. And I mean, we had the conversation yesterday. I was thinking, well, church will finish at kind of 11 o'clock, but we actually want to get our people who are coming to lunch to help us set up for lunch. Because it's not that they can't help set up for lunch, they can be involved in that ownership.
That's right. Yeah.
We've got to work out how to do all, I mean, the whole COVID safe thing makes it all more complex, but...
Well, and that, that sort of transfers it across, doesn't it, from not just inviting people to be part of your Christmas, but actually making your family part of theirs, which is what you're asking your congregation members to do. As they hospitably welcome these other people into their church and actually provide lunch for them on Christmas and spend Christmas with them rather than bringing them in to spend Christmas in their home.
Yeah.
I think there's all sorts of ways. One person on my heart really ached when I read this. She talked about how she loves being invited to families for Christmas, but at the same time she can't help sitting there and thinking, I don't have this myself. And that's a reality for many singles. And if you get that sense from the single person who's in your home, please don't take it personally. Please just recognise that they've got some internal grief that they're wrestling with. And don't read it as the fact that they're not loving being there, because I'm sure they are. But it's a complex day. And the reality is that for many of those people, they will be driving home to an empty place after, kind of the excitement of Christmas, and it can be a bit of a come down.
I saw you in a Facebook debate a couple of weeks ago on what we call our carol services.
Yeah.
And
not just carols, but particularly Christmas Day morning services.
Christmas Day morning services.
Too, yeah.
And I mean, well, I'll just be vulnerable here.
Go for it.
I mean, we decided to have carols last Sunday night for, particularly for adults, and we thought we'll pitch that at totally adult, and there'll be no kind of concession to children. We'll time it so that it'll be after kids should be in bed and all that kind of thing. And then we'll try and make one that's all kiddie friendly in the afternoon. And they decided to call the evening one Sundown Carols.
Yeah.
But what do you call that kiddie carols one? And should you have a kiddie carols one? Because, I mean, what's your take as the person who's done a doctorate on what to call these kind of carol services?
Not quite what the doctorate is on, so I'll leave someone else to do that doctorate. Look, it's a real mixed bag, and, the discussion...
Should you call it family carols or not? You don't think so?
Well, look, I think carol services can be a little bit different, because carol services in particular, there might be, we really want this to be focused on kids. We want the community to actually, who would not come to church on Christmas, to bring their kids and come as a family to our carols. And I think it's appropriate to flag that. Whether it's, you call it kids carols or carols for family. I actually think, if you consider calling it carols for everyone, and then in your description make it really clear that families are really welcome, there's going to be a kids spot, things like that. I think there's ways that you can kind of just frame it which aren't so definitive. I think what I struggle with a little bit more is particularly referring to Christmas Day services as family celebrations. Look, I understand why churches tend to do that. I'm a graphic designer. I do a lot of work for churches, and the number of postcards that I've designed over the last 8 years.
You're sitting there thinking, I hate this.
Family celebration on Christmas Day. I think family celebration. Type it, Dani. But I understand that we're trying to communicate something to particularly the outside community, that we love children. Please bring your children to church on Christmas Day. I do understand that. But what I think we're not so good at recognising is that in saying that, we are also saying something else. We're saying this service is particularly for these people, this group of people. If you're not one of them, come along, but it's for these people. And that can be really isolating for the person, not just a single person, but the infertile couples, for the older people whose kids are growing. And so, again, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. There's not necessarily an easy solution, but I'd love to see us being a bit more creative about our communication that shows that we are for all people coming and celebrating the birth of Jesus with us on Christmas morning, rather than just this is a time for families to come and make memories together at church.
Now let's talk the next few weeks, and for those watching us in the Northern Hemisphere, this won't make as much sense, but we're in summer in the Southern Hemisphere, and Australia, New Zealand, we completely stop.
Yeah.
For when you put Christmas and summer and all of that together, New Year together, this is the time to invade Australia if you're we're all completely asleep. Australia's gone to the beach. What are the difficulties being single in this season?
Well, that's the thing. I think, we think Christmas Day is kind of the linchpin, and it is in a sense, but you've had 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, and then you've kind of got 4 weeks coming down off Christmas as well. And as you were saying, in January,
all the church programs stop?
All the church programs stop. It's our main school holiday time, summer school holidays, so families tend to, this year's a bit different because we're not allowed to go many places now, but families just tend to exit Sydney. Most single people I know don't take holidays in January, partly because, well, it's too expensive with school holidays on, there's no one to go with, there's all sorts of reasons.
My wife has been told the people with kids are all going away this moment, and so
you're not allowed.
Can you work this moment? Yeah,
that's right. And so January can just be, you walk into church and there's no one here. And so January can be difficult.
Here's the thing though, we worked out the next 2 Sundays, like the 27th of December, the first one in January, they are lower than average attendance, definitely lower than average attendance.
Yeah.
However, we are back to 90% by the second week in January of our regular attendance, but the difference is about 30% are new.
That's right. And you're also in, again, a demographic where there's not as many young families.
Yeah.
Other churches will be in a different situation where the church kind of empties.
So we've worked out we've got to be on our front foot from week 2 of January because we've got so many people trying us out, exploring whether or not they... And if we're asleep all January, we've got a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think again, this is not a generalisation for all singles, but I think there's anecdotally it can be quite a significant time of relational isolation throughout summer for singles. I was saying to you just before, and you were surprised about this, I find New Year's Eve one of the most difficult nights of the year.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Christmas, I know what I'm doing every year. I'm with my family. There's a default. I don't have to make decisions about that. I don't have to find something to do. I know that's not the same for other singles, but for me, that's the case. New Year's Eve feels like this really loaded year, a loaded night when we're meant to be celebrating the year that's gone. I mean, goodness knows this year, who knows what New Year's Eve can be like. But, in a non-COVID world, New Year's Eve is when we look back and we celebrate the year that's gone and we look forward to the year that's coming. And in my experience, people tend to have pretty time-honoured traditions of how they do that and who they do that with. Or they just don't do it at all, but they're happy sitting at home with their husband and their kids.
That's our position. We're basically boring.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be boring.
You can come and be boring with us.
Someone. I don't want to sit at home by myself on New Year's Eve. And in all honesty, I very rarely get invited anywhere on New Year's Eve. It's up to me to kind of put myself out there and say, could I please come and spend time with you? And I just want to make a comment about that because I think this is one thing, again, it's not true of all singles, but true of many. And it's particularly probably true again of those who have never been married. If you are not someone who's ever had an individual say to you, I enjoy you so much that I just want to be with you for the rest of my life. It's very hard to put yourself out there to someone, a friend, whoever it is, and say, could you please prioritise me? Would you please want to spend time with me? And I had that just a couple of weeks ago. Having finished my PhD, I decided I really wanted to have a celebration to celebrate that, and there'd been a number of milestones in my life that I had just let pass, and because I'm not married, there was no one sort of saying, hey, let's do something to celebrate. So I thought, well, I'm going to throw my own party and invite people to come. I almost cancelled it 6 times, including the morning of, because it is such a vulnerable thing to put yourself out there as a single person and say, please come and celebrate with me. Please come and prioritise me in your busy life. And it was I found it a really difficult thing. And I'm generally pretty robust as a single person. So if I find it difficult to sort of put my hand up and say, hey, could you please love me by prioritising me or inviting me or being with me, it'll be doubly so for many other singles. And so, again, going back to New Year's Eve, I think lots of singles really struggle on that. And being isolated on New Year's Eve in the day, you're meant to be celebrating the year that's come and think about all the things that are happening in the year that's forward, can be really difficult. And, that leads into the rest of summer when lots of people are away, you're still working, but everyone feels like, it's not true, but it feels like everyone else is off living their best life. You come to church and there's very few people there that you know. It can just be a difficult time of the year. And if you're divorced or widowed, there's all sorts of other complexities that go with that time as well.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing vulnerably there.
That's all right. Well, you said you were being vulnerable, so there you go.
You took it to the next level. The divorcee in this time, lots of people talk about this being a really hard time.
Yeah. And look, I'm not divorced. I've never been married, so I can't speak from personal experience. But again, talking to members of the single-minded community, one of my friends was talking about how, the whole kid changeover, how you navigate Christmas with your ex-husband or ex-wife, and there's children involved, and how that can be incredibly complicated. And
I was speaking to one guy, and he said he described the changeover of kids this Friday and how it was going to work, and he said it had been tortuous, the negotiation to get to that point.
And then that person passes their kids over to their ex-husband or ex-wife.
And then they're on their own.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're not. Hopefully they've got somewhere to go, but many may not. A little thing that my friend said was she's so thankful that she has friends who takes her boys out to buy her presents.
Tell us about this story. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she was saying she has friends who take the boys. She's got 2 boys. They take the boys out and they go shopping with them to buy her a Christmas present because without a husband who's actually facilitating that and young kids, that's not going to happen. And, this is a little thing, but I think it's worth mentioning. I think people would be surprised how few gifts lots of singles receive at Christmas. Now, it's not the material content of the gift. Again, it's about actually a demonstration of love, a demonstration of you've been on my mind, I've been thinking about you, I saw this and wanted to give it for you because I love you. I think, when you don't have a husband or a wife who's trying to buy you a meaningful, hopefully not just a vacuum cleaner, gift at Christmas, when you don't have kids who are making things for you or sort of, excited about giving you a gift, when you, possibly don't have bigger extended family or your extended family only gives gifts to kids in your family, you can be receiving very few gifts at Christmas. And again, that sounds a bit kind of wah, poor me, but it's again a measure of isolation relationally. And sometimes the gifts that you do receive are a bit tokenistic. You haven't had that person think, okay, how do I really meaningfully show my love to this person?
As you speak, I feel I don't think I operate in gifts as a love language. And so I just don't think in that space. And so as you say that, I think, I've failed so many people.
Please don't feel like you need to buy all the single people in your church a gift. And again, some people love languages. Gifts are not even on the horizon, And I think that just emphasises the way to love singles well is to know them well. To actually know how you can care for them at this time of the year.
I guess the message for the church pastor for January is part of our thing is to organise relational architecture. And just to notice that even though yes, we need to have a break, all that kind of thing, but there's some relational architecture to make sure is in place for the singles during January.
Yeah. And that's, one of the members of the single-minded community posted yesterday that she's just so thankful for all her church leaders because she knows what a year it's been. And I think most singles are generally aware that pastors cannot provide all the answers and click their fingers and make everything better. This is, and again, it's about single people themselves being intentional and proactive too. But yes, if the mindset of a church is, okay, January is kind of the press pause, we just sort of walk away and come back in at the end of January.
Yeah. And I mean, at one level, we do need to say to senior pastors at the moment, it is okay to take a little break. Absolutely. It is okay to press pause. And I was talking to Peter Mayerick, my friend from the Centre for Ministry Development this week, and he was saying, if you don't say anything else this week, Dominic, you've got to tell people it's okay to have a rest next week.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's incredibly important. I was in parish ministry myself for almost 7 years, and so I'm very much aware of that. But I think it doesn't mean that we need, as pastors, to do all the work here. It's actually helping others in our churches to remember that life doesn't just get put on pause for everybody over Christmas and January. It can actually be a really difficult time for the year. I was reading just in the paper yesterday, actually, that Lifeline is expecting something like a 40% increase in calls over the next few days, particularly because of what's happening in Sydney with COVID. But I think we get lost in the glossy joy of Christmas advertising and forget that this time of a year can be incredibly devastating and distressing for all sorts of different people for all sorts of different reasons.
Thanks so much for coming and talking to us.
Thanks, Dominic.
My guest on The Pastor's Heart, Dr. Dani Treweek. Well, she will be tomorrow. And it's been great to talk to her. We'll look forward to your company next week on The Pastor's Heart. And Merry Christmas.